Quinnipiac is out with a new depressing poll on foreign policy. They found the following, quote, Americans support the use of ground troops against ISIS by a 2-to-1 margin. 62% support sending ground troops versus only 30% who oppose. Democrats support ground troops 53% to 40%, while independents support the possibility by 60% to 35%. Only 39% worry that military efforts will go too far, while 53% worry it will not go far enough. Last year, only 37% of Americans supported ground troops, so it's a gigantic increase from then, which of course means, who do we blame here? The media. It's the mainstream media's fault by far. I mean, what I see here, this is the same issue that we faced back when an overwhelming majority of the American people, years after 9/11, were still convinced that Saddam Hussein was responsible for 9/11. The bottom line is the media simply did not discuss the facts enough and push them out there enough, so there was just this nonchalant acceptance of like, well, I guess we're in Iraq for a reason. I guess it has to be that Saddam Hussein had something to do with 9/11, so they just rationalized it in their own minds. And today, what does the media do? All they do all day long is fearmonger over ISIS. Every network, too. You know, obviously it happens the most on Fox, but CNN is close behind. And then you have even MSNBC. You have people like Chris Matthews, who did a ridiculous rant a few weeks ago where he thought he was like being virtuous and standing up for American values. And we don't stand by and watch people die. And meanwhile, what are they all missing? They're all discussing that at the same time that ISIS is doing what they're doing. Boko Haram is slaughtering people. Al-Shabaab, they're slaughtering people. Al-Nusra Front, they're slaughtering people. Al-Qaeda has taken over northern Mali. That's going to present a problem, of course. The list goes on and on. I mean, we spoke about various dictators around the world that we supported or actively support, and they're some of the worst people imaginable. I mean, Brunei, they just implemented Sharia law last year, and we're discussing entering them into the TPP. In fact, we did allow them into the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the so-called free trade deal. So we're attacking ISIS because they're implementing Sharia law, while at the same time we're allies with Brunei, and they're doing Sharia law. So it doesn't make any sense. And this is why it's so frustrating when you see coverage of the media, you know, across the board, going after ISIS, reporting on ISIS. And by the way, it's fine to do that, but I want all the facts. I don't want you to just do ISIS propaganda 24/7. Talk about how monstrous ISIS is, of course, but then you have to follow that up with discussing Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab and the other 10 countries that jihadists are currently involved in. Then you also have to discuss the 10 dictatorships that America is supporting where they're doing equally brutal shit as well. You have to discuss the fact that Saudi Arabia, our top ally, literally beheads people for sorcery and witchcraft and atheism and drug smuggling. You can't be so hypocritical in your coverage where our ally does the same shit and media has nothing to say about it. And they'll still act like they're our buddies and there's no problem here. But when it's ISIS, oh, be scared, be afraid, they're going to attack Idaho in 3 minutes, be afraid, be afraid, be afraid. So the problem is the media, the mainstream media, gives the American people a steady dose of fear-mongering over ISIS to the point where the initial gut reaction of America, which is to stay out, that gets overridden by so much propaganda because they're bombarded with it all the time. It's so frustrating because the media is failing us. They're failing us terribly. The only place where you get a real discussion about all the facts is if you go to new media and if you go to print outlets online, for example. Those are the only places where you get any serious discussion where, you know, we're not protecting people who do the same shit but are our buddies and going after people who it falls right in line with the narrative to attack them. So I blame the media, but also come on, you also do have to blame the American people. Is there a personal responsibility aspect to this that's frustrating, that the American people don't take this stuff seriously, where they really want to learn about it at a deeper level? Yeah, I have to blame the American people to a certain extent, because really, I mean, this is what you're going to do? Did you not see what happened with the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan? This is what your beliefs are now? The same fucking thing. So we go to war in Afghanistan in 2001, Iraq in 2003. We absolutely destroy both of those places, like we were discussing, killed minimum 200,000 civilians in Iraq. We further radicalized the region and destabilized the region and created more terrorists. That's a stone cold fact based on various studies. And then what do people do? They go, let's try the exact same fucking thing, which is going to make the problem even worse. So I also do blame the American people, because you got to care enough to connect the dots logically.